Hey everybody, I am Alex Cohen.
And I'm Sara Sadhwani.
And welcome to the latest edition of the Inside the Issues podcast. Yes, I'm getting over something and I sound like garbage. Please be patient with my last stance of a voice. But we have so much to talk about. That's why we still had to do it, including the fact that President Biden and Dr. Jill Biden are coming to town. The timing is super interesting. We're going to get into that.
Indeed. And former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy announced this week he will not seek re-election and he will leave his seat early at the end of this year. We will break it all down.
And Lindsey Horvath became the youngest ever chair of the LA County Board of Supervisors. We will talk about what that youth means in politics. So jumping into it, Kevin McCarthy. Kind of not so much a total secret. There have been burbles and rumblings.
Yeah, and we've talked about this here as well in the past, right? That after being ousted as House Speaker, do you stay on and just be a rank and file member, or does that bruise one's ego to the extent that you would want to leave and perhaps onto greener pastures, right? I mean, oftentimes when we see members of Congress leaving their posts, they end up in very lucrative lobbying jobs or other kinds of positions. Certainly that was the case for Kevin McCarthy's colleague, also from the Central Valley not too long ago, Devin Nunes, who left his seat. He seemed to leave it in the middle of the redistricting process, which was very interesting to me, but left to head up Trump's Truth Social. And so certainly there's precedent for this.
Yeah, and I think that's a good time. Let's just jump right into the regular segment we do every week. What's the word? This word is?
Invest. Invest, right?
How much do you invest in this seat? If it's clear your colleagues don't really want you there, you could go off to greener pastures.
That's right.
There's a video that Kevin McCarthy released, and I actually think you can see he looks kind of relieved to be investing his future someplace else. It kind of reminded me of The Office. They kind of included in it the little sit down, mic check, whatever. And then here's what he had to say about why he is stepping down.
Today, I am driven by the same purpose that I felt when I arrived in Congress. But now, it is time to pursue my passion in a new arena. While I'll be departing the House at the end of this year, I will never, ever give up fighting for this country that I love so much.
Sara, let's talk for a moment. What does this mean for his seat?
Yeah, I've already been fielding a ton of questions about the seat and Democrats wondering, can we flip this seat? And the answer to that is no. As blue of a state as you might think California is, this region of the Central Valley is very, very much solid Republican territory. The voters of this district went to Trump in 2020. There's a strong MAGA presence there. This district voted in favor of the recall of Gavin Newsom. So it is a very different kind of profile than many of the other regions throughout the state. Even some of the other Central Valley areas, many of the other districts in the Central Valley are identified as Voting Rights Act districts because of the large number of Latinos in those districts. Those districts are seen as a little bit more flippable, a little bit more of a swing district setup, but not this Kevin McCarthy seat. And so it certainly is causing a whole lot of folks to scurry to try and figure out who is going to run for this seat. Candidate filing for the primary is December 13th. So if they're going to run for the seat, they're going to have to act fast.
And that officially, Governor Newsom has to call a special election. He's got a couple days to do that.
That's right.
But already there's been discussions of names, including State Senator Shannon Grove, who's really made a name for herself recently. He's a very strong presence. David Valadao of Hanford, possible long shot. Assemblymember Vince Vaughn would be really interesting to see that area represented by an Asian candidate there. But one of my personal favorites you mentioned, Devin Nunes, who we should know, who has still $11 million socked away in a congressional campaign account.
Exactly. And so then what do you do with that kind of money? And I think that's a really interesting piece, right? Will Devin Nunes want to jump back into Congress? If he did so, he would lose all stature, right? He would come in as a first-time junior member of the House. Republicans, I don't know if that's something that he would realistically want to do. But as you mentioned, he has all of these campaign dollars. He certainly has the name recognition. And I would imagine, I don't know, I don't use Truth Social myself, but I don't know, is that a really solid job, or is that a position that might be a little bit on shaky territory? Maybe if it is a little bit more shaky, maybe that switches the calculation for him. I think the David Valadao one, I want to go back to that also. Really interesting. David Valadao represents the district just adjacent to this Kevin McCarthy district. This is one of those Latino Voting Rights Act seats that I was mentioning where the majority of the district is Latino. He has had challenges from Rudy Salas numerous times, again will do so. David Valadao has definitely moderated his approach in comparison to many of the other Republicans in that area, on issues like immigration and the Trump impeachment, spending millions of dollars on the campaign. It wouldn't surprise me to see someone like that switch gears and be a bit of a carpetbagger and go into this really red, safe seat. He is already there in Congress. Would he want to make that switch? Would that play out well with the voters there? Hard to know, but that has to be on his mind if he wants to continue to have his career in Congress. And
one more thing on the topic of investing. We've also learned this week, thanks to the LA Times, that Kevin McCarthy's leadership PAC has been investing a whole lot of money in the Terranea Resort. I just want to say, it was only one line about it in the Times piece, but I don't think it's a coincidence that it is right next door to Trump's golf course.
Absolutely.
Sarah, tell us what's happening there.
Exactly. So of course, candidates can fundraise for themselves, but leadership in particular has access to these various PACs that they can fundraise for. So there's a real difference, and I want to just clarify this because just in the news this week was George Santos being expelled from Congress, largely for many of these violations that he's had for his campaign finance, buying personal clothes. Yeah, exactly, getting Botox, etc. But these leadership PACs can be used for personal expenditures. And they're really meant for the leadership of the parties to be able to fundraise and then give that money off to other candidates. So over the course since 2012, McCarthy, according to this LA Times report, has spent over $1 million alone just on hotels, private air travel, lavish restaurants.
Way more than any of his colleagues.
Exactly. More than anyone else who has had one of these leadership PACs. And so what are they for? It's for whining and dining all of those Republican donors and then sending that money off to the candidates most in need. And here in California, there's a whole lot of them in those swing districts. We mentioned already, of course, David Valadao, but also Mike Garcia who we've talked about a whole lot on this podcast, Michelle Steele in Orange County, Ken Calvert, who we've talked about a little bit, being challenged by Will Rollins out in the Palm Springs area, as well as John Duarte up in the San Joaquin Valley. So with McCarthy leaving, it poses a big question then of who will be able to do this whining and dining of all of these big Republican donors? Will they automatically go and start supporting these other candidates, or were they really just tied to their relationship with McCarthy
and his wife?
And so this is seen as a real question mark about what then happens with Republican donors. Will they continue to invest their dollars in candidates that they perhaps don't know as well?
Also, let's talk about the timing. This LA Times piece came out the day after Kevin McCarthy resigns. Did McCarthy and his team know this was coming out? They did reach out to him for comment.
Yeah.
Was that part of his decision to step down? Or did the Times say, we were going to hold off on this for a bit, but now that Kevin McCarthy, it's a very chicken and egg kind of situation.
I'll tell you I agree with you, and I'll tell you my take. It seemed like, and I haven't talked with anyone about it, but just looking at that timing, I couldn't help but feel as I was reading that piece also that they've been doing the research because they're going through all of the FEC filings, which is not easy to do, takes a whole lot of time. And in it, they talk about how they can't really see what the expenditures exactly were, right?
Yeah,
like they have these
round numbers.
Yeah, weird round numbers, which if you get a bill somewhere, there's always a few like dollars and cents. It's never $7,500 and 0 cents. So it seemed like they were in the middle of researching this when he makes this announcement, and then they moved it forward, perhaps. That was my thought on it, but I don't know. You're the journalist. You know how these decisions get made.
I think that's a good take.
Yeah.
And speaking of fundraising and investing, Joe Biden is coming to town, and the timing is so interesting. Since announcing that he was running for re-election, he has not come to the ATM known as Southern California and Hollywood, because it would have been a really bad look during the writer's strike, during SAG-AFTRA strike, if he got all these money from studio execs while people are on the picket line, right? Like, it wasn't going to look good. So these strikes finally come to an end. SAG-AFTRA approves their contract this week. He's coming out for this event that's going to be held at the
home of Michael Smith, and who's a celebrity interior designer, as well as his partner James Costas, who was a former HBO executive and served as the ambassador to Spain under the Obama administration, and
a lot of Hollywood names.
Quite the lineup of Hollywood names. The host committee includes folks like Steven Spielberg and his wife Kate Capshaw, recording industry mogul David Geffen, Shonda Rhimes, Rob Reiner, and of course Nancy Pelosi. And then there was an interesting Democrat.
Sorry.
Lenny
Kravitz.
And Lenny Kravitz is going to perform. And one other interesting Democrat, Rick Caruso, is rumored to be a part of this event as well.
He's one of the chairs.
Yeah.
So they're having this event. It would seem like great timing, and given all the difficulties the Biden campaign has been facing, this would be perfect, except for the fact that there is still a very controversial situation in the Middle East. And people who are protesting and demanding a ceasefire, including the People's City Council, a very vocal group here in Southern California. They got a hold of the address. They have released it. They kind of doxed the party. And so now it's really unclear how many protesters are going to show up in the Homely Hills. It could be a very interesting situation.
Right, because once those protesters are there, how do people get in and out? Will people even want to cross that protest in order to get in there or not?
Not a good look.
It will be very interesting to watch for sure. If this is able to go off without a hitch, however, I think it holds the potential to raise millions and millions of dollars for Biden. Of course, this election is likely to surpass even the last election, which was the highest, the most expensive election ever recorded here in the United States, the 2020 election, with estimates of $14 billion having been spent between the presidential and congressional elections. Biden alone having raised in 2020 over $1 billion. So if he wants to actually compete against Trump, or even if there were a Nikki Haley rise, perhaps, she also got the big endorsement from the Koch brothers this week, he's going to have to be raising a whole lot of money. This is likely not going to be the last time that he is in Southern California trying to get folks to invest in his campaign. I heard there was a little background and backlash or perhaps or scuffle about whether or not the role of Jeffrey Katzenberg in all of this, who has largely served, one of the co-founders of DreamWorks, who has largely served as a bit of a gatekeeper to Democratic fundraising here in Hollywood. I'm kind of so curious. I don't have more information than that, but solely that it was notable that he wasn't hosting this first fundraiser, and perhaps would have other kinds of events with Biden this weekend.
Really interesting. And especially note, too, the Biden administration investing a lot of money, just a big announcement about a huge chunk of change coming to us for high-speed rail.
Right.
In time for the
Olympics. $6 billion, right, to expand those high-speed rail projects that have been floundering for years.
Yeah, the same week that we found out that we are in a really serious hole when it comes to the California state budget, because those revenues were not at all what they were projecting. So very interesting time to see who's investing and where.
Right.
So Last but not least, want to talk about something that happened this week as Lindsey Horvath, who had served on the local level in West Hollywood, beat Bob Hertzberg to become the fifth queen there on the Board of Supervisors. And I talked to Lindsey when she was first elected, and she told me the way that it works being the chair of the board is that it's like a round robin. It was supposed to be her turn. And she said, oh my God, I just got elected. Yeah. This is not a good idea. And I have to say, hats off to her to know, like,
let me learn the job.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me invest in the system a bit before we do this. So she came up with this agreement with Janice Hahn. She kind of co-chaired for the past year. But then now, officially, she takes up the baton. And she gave a speech where she talked about being the youngest person. And she said, it's not about a personal accolade for me. She said, it's really about the importance of young people in politics. She said, you know, everybody loved that Whitney Houston song, I believe the children are our future, and teach them well. And oh God, don't let me sing with this voice. Anyway, but she said, you know, really, it's not about investing in young people now so in the future they can do stuff. It's investing in young people now so they can do stuff now. She came here to Spectrum to speak with my colleague Kate Cagle about young people in politics. Let's take a look.
I think we often hear, you know, our young people are our future, and we hear these, like, you know, sometimes kind of hokey things said about, like, the brightness of future, the innocence of our youth, and how it gives us all this hope. But I think our young people we are seeing on our streets are impatient. They are demanding change. They know that if we wait one more second, our world is literally burning. We might not have a planet to speak of. I mean, the sense of urgency that our young people have matters, and I think it matters now.
Sarah, I think this is really interesting because it's happening at this inflection point. Yeah. On the one hand, I think here locally, you see Karen Bass investing in those young leaders she took to Washington, D.C., Hugo Soto Martinez, Eunice Hernandez. You see young person Kenneth Mejia teaming up with Rick Cole, veteran, right? You have all these symbiotic relationships, right? And I think this is a really good demonstration of that. At the same time, a new poll came out showing that at least in nationwide politics, the interest and enthusiasm among young voters is really dropping, especially among young Black voters. And the kind of appetite you had for the elections in 2020 just not showing up this time around. So.
Yeah, and I think age has taken such a huge role kind of in the mindset of voters, right? Especially given the looming presidential race, presumably between Biden and Trump, these two individuals who age is a big factor in people's thought processes around both of these candidates, quite frankly. Even if Trump were to be elected to president, he would then become the oldest president ever elected. He's only a few years behind Biden. And so I think that the Lindsey Horvath taking on this role is really symbolic of this kind of change that we're seeing, but also this desire, right, as you point to of this poll, the kind of desire that people really have to see the next generation in place. And of course, even with Nancy Pelosi leaving the speakership as well, right, and kind of passing on that baton, there's something that feels really good about it when there's this, when it's done positively, as opposed to, whereas, Dianne Feinstein holding out till the very end and almost a painful goodbye to our leaders who have served at their maximum capacity, but simply can't do anymore.
And one final thing, when it comes to investing and who's investing in the city of LA and who isn't, a new report from City Controller Kenneth Mejia shows 6 out of 10 municipal employees of the city of LA don't live in the city of LA. And that means about $3.6 billion in pay is being spent elsewhere. I actually find this really fascinating.
Me too. And when you think about city jobs, I'm generally thinking, and I don't see all of the details here, but these are probably pretty middle class kinds of jobs. So when we're talking about people who are not living in the city and who are leaving for many of the suburban areas, we're probably talking about a whole host of middle class folks. We were just talking not too long ago about the beautiful, expensive Hollywood industry and the very wealthy people that live in Los Angeles. Yeah. We, of course, know that there's a lot of folks who are the working poor, and of course people that are even experiencing homelessness. What we need within the city is a vibrant middle class,
Yeah.
and I think this report really shows that.
And I think
that's a place we
it's
need
this
to go.
catch-22 about the fact that the people who could make LA more affordable, especially in terms of housing,
Yeah.
they can't afford to live there.
Right.
Right. I mean, and there is a new report that just came out that apparently this is the most expensive time ever to buy a house. Some record-breaking. I don't have the exact numbers, but it's really interesting. Will this be something that Karen Bass tries to change as mayor? We shall see. It is going to be her year anniversary in office next week. Perhaps something that we will be talking about on our next podcast. Hopefully, I will have more of a voice by then. Thank you for sticking with us. We are on social media. I am there at Alex Cohen in LA.
And I'm at Sara Sadhwani.
See you later.
The Inside the Issues podcast is a Spectrum News One production. Crystal Goss is our producer. Nathaniel Leathers is our editor. The executive in charge of production is Jeff Shore.